please that everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Do I expect that to be? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And given that this is the 18th anniversary of 9/11, this moment of silence to remember all the losses we suffered of our innocents as well. Now, it is my very great honor to introduce Representative Lee Oxenham. She is the clerk of the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. She's a former study director at the National Academy of Sciences, where she produced several works of domestic and international economic policy analysis. She is a lifelong Sierra Club member and New Hampshire 350 member. In the 1990s, as Patapsco Riverkeeper, part of Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s Waterkeeper Alliance, she successfully brought suit against Constellation Energy for exceeding particulate matter standards at their coal-fired power plant in Baltimore Harbor. Lee will speak to 3 of the bills. And she and Rev. Myrna are our legislative champions, so thank you very much.
This way I get to see you. New Hampshire is incredibly lucky in its knowledgeable and committed cadre of volunteer citizen activists. This is especially true in the energy arena. These activists make the trek to Concord again and again from all points in the state. They sit through endless meetings in the House and Senate. They testify, they support the bills, and they try their hardest to make progress on the clean energy transition and the effort to combat the climate crisis. Rather than be disheartened by the raft of good energy legislation that was vetoed this year, they got together and came up with a list of 5 vetoed bills they consider essential to moving New Hampshire forward with the clean energy transition. And they called this press conference here today to demonstrate the broad base of support across New Hampshire for the bills that we will be addressing. Many of these members come from the Sierra Club, 350 New Hampshire, Mothers Out Front. They're from labor unions, youth groups, and the faith community, and you will be hearing from members of each of those groups. I feel honored, very honored, that I was asked to champion their cause today and help rally support for this broad-based, nonpartisan veto override effort. With this press conference, we are all calling on all of our legislators, irrespective of party, to vote to override the unwarranted vetoes of these good energy bills, and to call on New Hampshire voters to let their voices be heard. Call your representatives, send emails to your senators, contact them and ask them to support the overrides. Recent events, from the leveling of islands in the Bahamas to unprecedented fires in the Amazon basin, increased climate migrant flows, and the loss of billions of tons of ice from Greenland, all bring home to us the message: our time to act is limited. We cannot stand idly by. We must take concerted action to stave off the worst consequences of the climate crisis. Just 1 year ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change told us we have roughly 10 years in which we can act, move off of fossil fuels, and change our climate's increasingly dangerous trajectory. Our New Hampshire legislature passed innumerable excellent bills this session. Bills that incorporated policies that will head us in the right direction to meet the climate challenge and protect our citizens, our communities, and our natural resources. 5 of these bills have been singled out for special consideration as they have the potential to help transform New Hampshire's energy future. And their vetoes absolutely must be overridden when the legislature meets on September 18th and 19th. Right now, I'm going to ask my fellow Science, Technology, and Energy Committee member, Representative Roy Corey Mercer, excuse me, to come forward and join me at the podium. As I said, he's also a member of Science, Technology, and Energy, a retired iron worker, and former officer of the Iron Workers Union. He is a renewable energy enthusiast, a former Coas County Economic Development Corporation officer, a former Rotary president, and Lions Club member. He will speak on HB 365.
Thank you. I didn't expect to be back here again this year. We passed a very similar bill last session with a different body, with a Republican body, and it was vetoed, and we just missed by a couple of votes on the override. So we went back to work on it again this year, and it passed by a wide margin with some adjustments to the bill by a 254 to 98 margin in the House. So we have there's broad support, nonpartisan, it's both parties are on the bill. Okay, but since the last month, since the veto, we've had a lot of stuff coming out here that you've been hearing. One is, you may hear that the increase from 1 to 5 megawatts is too much and will destabilize the grid in the market. That's a big falsehood. Renewable power generators less than 5 megawatts, a small portion of the region's total energy production. Because they are locally throughout the grid, add stability to grid operations by providing energy, diversity, and distributed generation. The 5 megawatt cap is reasonable. My glasses. Because the limit is where the region grid considers the power plant to be wholesale producer. The 5 megawatt cap also allows businesses and communities to right-size projects for their electricity needs, maximize savings through economic scale. It is an important part of the solution to the high electricity costs that you supply. I'm going to skip a couple of the big ones that we get lost in. You will also hear right now, the big talk is it's going to hurt ratepayers. That is a big falsehood. In addition to the PUC finding that net metering does not shift significant costs to electric rates, 365 removes regulatory barrier preventing many small businesses and communities producing their own low-cost power or entering into a privately negotiated power contracts with local renewables. 365 enables renewable power for generators between 1 and 5 megawatts to participate in the retail power market and offer consumers more competitive options, bigger savings, and greater energy independence. The other big talk right now is that it's a subsidy. It will cost ratepayers millions of dollars. That's the biggest talk right now out there. There is no such mention in the bill's fiscal note reported by the PUC. Moreover, the fiscal note from last year's net metering bill says to this extent state, county, and local governmental units are able to install their own renewable generation facilities for those governmental entities that may benefit from lower electric costs. It may receive revenues from the form of net metered payments for the excess power generated. You're also hearing, this is the biggest, the two biggest talks right now, is it only going to benefit large-scale solar companies. HB Fit will benefit New Hampshire ratepayers by increasing the supply of low-cost power from local sources such as biomass boilers, New Hampshire's small hydro facilities, and solar arrays on landfills and rooftops. The local power will avoid the high cost of transmitting electricity from distant power plants. It also will benefit all consumers by adding more competition to retail power sales. More locally produced power means more savings, more energy independence for New Hampshire. You also hear that the other talk is that it'll shift costs from consumers who net meter to those who do not. The PUC has found no evidence of any significant cost shifting from net metering. Consumers who net meter under the bill will use PUC-approved rules designated to prevent cost shifting and ensure fair rates to all ratepayers. Furthermore, utilities will use local net metered power to offset imported power, which will maximize ratepayer benefits and prevent cost shifting. Liberty Utility already handles net metered power in this way because it saves their customers money and projects on their customers against regional cost shifting by other states onto New Hampshire ratepayers. Fuel diversity brings security and lowers rates for all.
Thank you so much. SB 168 would increase the percentage of solar energy that utilities have to include in the electric electricity they sell. By 2025, it would raise the required percentage in the renewable portfolio standard from less than 1% to over 5%. The veto message called this bill crony capitalism at its worst and said the bill sets an unattainable goal, which would result in millions of dollars in added cost to ratepayers. But we know that without concerted efforts to move off of imported fossil fuels, we are sending billions of dollars annually out of state to pay for those fossil fuels. With this bill, in fact, we would be investing millions of dollars in good jobs and manufacturing here in New Hampshire's economy, revitalizing our communities, creating those good jobs, and attracting a young, high-tech workforce, so needed in our graying state. Solar panels that pump out electricity locally when it's needed the most, easing the stress on the power grid on those hot summer days that are becoming increasingly frequent, make the grid more reliable, and they cut the need for expensive transmission projects. Local solar, especially when paired with storage, can also eliminate the need for costly and polluting power plants. The 80 megawatts of installed solar capacity in New Hampshire today represents $214 million in local investment and nearly 1,000 local full-time jobs. Achieving the goals of SB 168 would result in 600 megawatts of solar capacity in the state. An attainable goal, and represent $1 billion in new private sector solar investment, meaning thousands of more jobs. SB 72, I'm going to be speaking to three rather quickly, is another important vetoed energy bill. It would eliminate the so-called sweeping of renewable energy certificates, or RECs. Currently, New Hampshire's utilities can claim any of the unclaimed RECs against their own compliance obligation under the Renewable Portfolio Standard. For those homeowners with solar systems who don't register their own system's RECs because it's cumbersome and it's expensive and you don't get anything for it, the utilities are able to step in and claim those certificates, meeting their obligations, which means they don't have to purchase those certificates, and we don't gain the money into the Renewable Energy Fund from alternative compliance payments. This undercuts the REC market, depresses the prices of those who do participate in the market, and does nothing to advance the clean energy transition. Since the utilities are now able to meet much or all of their obligations using these cost-free RECs, they buy fewer of them, decreasing the proceeds on which that Renewable Energy Fund depends. It's their only source of funds. This is a double whammy against renewable energy, with predictably negative impacts on ratepayers, renewable energy owners, and the economics of renewable energy projects, so that we have fewer projects undertaken. SB 205, the third of the bills that I'm going to be addressing today, concerns the System Benefits Charge, or SBC. It's a relatively small charge. It's included on every electric bill, and it funds energy efficiency programs. These programs result in across-the-board energy savings. They benefit the entire electrical system. That's why it's called a system benefit charge. They also cut the payments that ratepayers have to make. And they provide funds for low-income households. In 2016, the legislature established an energy efficiency resource standard that sets goals for energy efficiency and provides funding for energy efficiency projects through the SBC. But in 2018, renewable energy opponents passed a bill that took the authority to do the rate making away from the nonpartisan Public Utilities Commission and gave it to the legislature, making that charge, that single charge on the electricity bill, a political football. Passing SB 205 would return control over setting the SBC rates to the PUC where it belongs. They are the nonpartisan experts. They are responsible for setting all the other rates and charges on the electrical bill, and the utilities themselves would prefer it because it would be sustainable, they would have a long-term commitment. It would be predictable. As the Department of Environmental Services here in New Hampshire has attested, every single dollar invested in energy efficiency provides consumers with $4.70 in economic benefits. That's a $1 investment for an almost $5 benefit. There's nothing wrong with that picture. That is not putting millions of dollars onto the backs of ratepayers. It is saving them money. The veto of this bill flies in the face of efforts to increase energy efficiency, our most effective tool promoting the clean energy transition. The veto of SB 205 will result in increasing costs. We want an override of the veto to bring down the cost to ratepayers. And it looks like I do have a third, SB 205, which is a bill that expands the workforce development that's needed to implement all these other projects. If we don't have the trained individuals available to build the solar arrays and weatherize the homes, we're not going to be able to attain our goals. These programs also arrange low-cost financing of projects for eligible fixed or low-income residents. It ensures no one is left behind. Everyone can improve their living spaces, whether they have a house, an apartment, a condo, a trailer park. Energy efficiency is the fastest, cheapest, and most effective way to lower energy costs. There are currently about 8,000 low-income homes on a 10-year wait list for energy efficiency services. Think of those numbers. And many thousands more would be on that list if they didn't already know there were 8,000 people ahead of them, and what's the point of signing up on the list? Continuing to feed our fossil fuel addiction by providing funds for fossil fuel assistance instead of providing a means to end our dependency on fossil fuels via improved energy efficiency and increased use of renewables is an egregious waste of taxpayer money and does nothing to help us avert the impending catastrophe that the climate crisis represents. Investments in energy alternatives now will pay off in spades later by averting hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars in disaster preparation, mitigation, and reconstruction after the disasters hit. In closing, please let your legislators know you support overriding the ill-considered and unwarranted vetoes of SB 168, SB 72, and SB 205.
Thank you. My name's Kathy Cordery. I'm from New Hampshire Sierra Club. As a union member myself, I found that it was very important that we include SB 271. And I want to recognize the other unions that are here. Mr. Bill Ladd, who is the current chief steward of Local 228, National Visa Center in Portsmouth. Back in. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Ladd. And we have also from the New Hampshire AFL-CIO here, Glenn, thank you, Brackett. Thank you for representing the workers in New Hampshire. And also, I'd like to introduce Dave Pelletier. He is the current president of the New Hampshire Builders and Construction Workers Council here in New Hampshire. And I think part of including this bill in the context of all these other bills shows that we prioritize the fair and just transition of workers into the clean energy economy that is upon us, and that is not tomorrow, but that is today. So thank you, Dave Pelletier.
Thank you, Kathy. So, like Kathy said, I am the president of the New Hampshire Building and Construction Trades Council. We're a member organization representing 13 trade unions involved in different aspects of construction throughout New Hampshire. And I'm happy to be here today in support of the override of these clean energy bills, and particularly Senate Bill 271, the prevailing wage bill. Prevailing wage may seem like an odd addition to this group of clean energy bills, but we believe prevailing wage is essential to the state's transition to a clean energy economy. With prevailing wage, workers will be guaranteed a fair wage and benefit while they work on state construction, whether it is new green construction, existing building retrofits, or renewable energy projects like wind or solar. In New Hampshire, current state law requires contracts to go to the lowest bidder. In construction, that often means the contractor who pays the least in wages and benefits. We have all seen what driving down wages and benefits has done to the construction industry. Try finding a contractor to work on your home or business. The current workforce is graying, and young people are encouraged to seek other career opportunities. A prevailing wage will show young people considering a career in the construction trades that the state values them and their expertise. In the governor's veto message, he states, New Hampshire already pays some of the highest wages in the country, and this bill is an will unnecessarily raise the cost on New Hampshire taxpayers for government projects. It is clear to me that the governor has not spoken to the construction workers that I know. Some of them members of my own family that join thousands of other New Hampshire residents and drive every day in bumper-to-bumper traffic for an hour or more across the state border for better wages and benefits. While the governor's veto message states prevailing wage will raise the cost of construction for New Hampshire ratepayers or taxpayers, research suggests that is not the case. Although wages and benefits may increase in some cases as the cost of labor is defined by the Davis-Bacon wage determinations, bidding contractors look for other efficiencies to win the bid. When workers have family supporting wage and benefit packages, including health and retirement benefits, they are less likely to seek state assistance when sick or retired. One of the biggest benefits of prevailing wage is the increased utilization of apprenticeship programs. On prevailing wage work, every worker is considered a journey person unless enrolled in an approved apprenticeship program. An apprentice's wages are based on a percentage of the journey person rate. While some companies or trades may not ordinarily utilize apprenticeship programs, prevailing wage encourages their use as a way to keep crew costs lower and win the bid and train the workforce of the future. Apprenticeship programs are currently teaching cutting-edge green technology. As an example, Electricians Local 490 here in Concord is investing in solar and wind technologies to train electricians for today as well as the future. Apprentices at Plumbers and Pipefitters Local 131 are being trained in stormwater capture, water conservation, and green building systems. Apprenticeships create a highly skilled and motivated workforce, enabling contractors to bring jobs in on time and within budget. In closing, a prevailing wage law is good for New Hampshire workers, providing family-sustaining wages and benefits, and it encourages young people to remain here in New Hampshire. It's good for our economy. Local workers spend their money supporting local merchants. It's good for the New Hampshire construction industry, encouraging apprenticeships that provide a pathway for local youth to a career with family wages and benefits. And it's good for the state of New Hampshire, ensuring state construction is built by a highly trained and safe workforce invested in their communities. I urge the New Hampshire legislature to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 271 and the other energy-related bills.
My name is Kimberly Rawson, and I'm an activist here in New Hampshire. And it is my pleasure retired science teacher, and climate change activist, Phil Brown.
Thank you, teacher. Kim is also a teacher. As a scientist and a science teacher, there's a saying that kind of goes around, and basically it's a saying that's applicable to all of human evolution. And that's that data is collected by the senses or verifiable instruments, and that data is then analyzed by scientists using the scientific method to produce information. And that information is then peer-reviewed by other scientists to prove its validity, and then that information can be used literally to ensure the survival of the human species. January 27, 1986 is a night that I will always think about when I think about that concept, because it was the night that the NASA administrators chose to ignore the scientific information presented by Morton Thiokol engineers that basically stated that there was a 13% probability of catastrophic failure if they chose to launch the space shuttle Challenger the next day. And that loss occurred because of hubris and ego on the part of those administrators. That hubris and that ego is present today in our society as it relates to climate change. 97% of actively publishing climate scientists fervently believe, based on the data, that 100% of the 1.5 global increase in Earth and ocean temperature over the last century is applicable to human beings. 100%. 100%. I've got some data that I would like to share that basically defines the billion-dollar costs associated with that ego and hubris. And I have it on a piece of paper, so I do have to look at it. From 1981 to the year 2000, the total cost in CPI-adjusted dollars for that 20-year period from 1981 to the year 2000 was $414 billion. That's what it cost for all the natural disasters, such as drought, flooding, freezing, severe storms, tropical cyclones, wildfires, winter storms, $416 billion. And out of that, we accrued 3,848 deaths. In just the 3 years, from 2016 to 2018, the total cost for those same kind of disasters was $460 billion. That's $50 billion more for a 3-year period than the 20-year period from 1981 to 2000. In that same time frame, we had 3,663 deaths. This is data from NOAA's billion-dollar disaster website, and it's available for any of us to look at. Any of us. On that night of January 28th, after Krista McAuliffe was lost and the other 6 Challenger astronauts, I held my newborn daughter in my arms, and I cried. Because I knew there were 7 families that were not going to get to hold a loved one again. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce my daughter, Morgan Krista Brown, and my granddaughter, Adelaide, as the last speaker today, because they too are very interested in bringing us out of the dark, both literally and figuratively, into the light of renewable energy. Thank you.
My name is Morgan Brown. I'm a resident here of Concord
Concord, New Hampshire, lifelong. I'm a mother, a new mother. My daughter, Adeline.
Look, everybody, turn sideways and get closer. Because this is about love, right? This is about love. All right, here we go, folks. On three. One, two, three.
Yeah.
Oh, can we get our labor friend on?